another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We're going to take a peek inside the world of NAIA lacrosse, and specifically the Wolverine Hoosiers Athletic Conference, the WHAC. And we're going to spend some time with four of the coaches on part one of our 2024 spring preview. This week, we get a chance to spend some time with Carlos Mata from Madonna, first-year coach at Siena Heights, Frank Rogers, and that'll be an interesting conversation since Frank and I know each other. Chris Klaber from Aquinas talked to us from Grand Rapids, and we finish off with one of the best teams in the country, from Concordia Van Arbor, and certainly that's Ty McGuire, and I think Ty will give you a really good insight to the program, to the NAI, and how the program works for them. Looking forward to that conversation in the preview and following up with them this year. Next week, we'll catch up with the rest of the teams in the league. But for now, we're going to spend the time, and we're going to start right off the bat with Chris Klaber from Aquinas. He'll be back in a second. Welcome back. We're talking with Chris Klaber, the head coach at Aquinas College. We're going to have a little conversation about the NAIA men's lacrosse season, do a little bit of a preview. We're talking to Chris from Grand Rapids, starting his third year. You started out 11-5 last year, backed up to 8-8, but it looks like things are kind of testing some good stuff. So as you start your third year, maybe give us a hint on what's coming.
So it's going to be a much different year for Aquinas College men's lacrosse this year. We've graduated a lot of big pieces. It's kind of like a refreshing of a different era here. We graduated the all-time leading point scorer in NAIA lacrosse history, who's also our all-time leading goal scorer. We also graduated our all-time leading assist man, our starting goalie for the last 5 years, and a couple other key pieces, guys that our other teams in our league and around the country know really, really well. And so there's a little bit of loss there. There's a little bit of turnover, but there's also the interjection of a bunch of new guys that we've had. We had a 17-man recruiting class join us, kind of restock our ranks, and we're a much younger, fresher, different style team this year. So I'm really excited to see what we can do this spring.
You have background as a player at Mount St. Mary's, the Division I program. You've obviously you were at Adams State, so you've been around the NCAA version of things. Maybe explain to us a little different between what is NAIA and certainly what is the NCAA.
Yeah, so basically the NAIA, in short, is just an alternative version to the NCAA. We have very similar rule sets in a lot of regards. Our gameplay uses the same rule book as they do in D1, 2, and 3. But our off-the-field things, the structuring of our training, the limitations on what we're allowed to do are a little bit different, which give us some different options there. Mainly the number one thing being we're able to offer athletic scholarships, which really changes things on a team-to-team basis. We're able to bring in really high-level athletes with those. And then one of the things that I've really enjoyed about being in the NAIA is just less limitations on training and practices. And so I went the last 4 years, I was a Division III head coach, and the transition here has been great for me. And I've really loved being able to get out on the practice field with the guys, get more training in, get more hands-on time with them. So there's a little bit of differences in there, but it's mostly just a setup. And at the end of the day, game day feels almost exactly the same.
We go back 10 years. Club teams around here were really good. If you go back to the Michigan with John Paul, you worked through that whole thing. Obviously, Division III was getting their act. The MIAA was getting their act together. Obviously, they've added a number of teams in the Midwest through the NAIA. And I think a lot of the club teams have kind of decimated because there's another place for guys to go that's much more organized than a club program. And if you look at the club, you look at the MCLA now, what was, and I actually think it's a really good move because it's much more organized by coaches who have some idea what they're doing, and it's a chance for maybe not the great Division I player, but a chance to land someplace to play a little more closer to what essentially would be college lacrosse. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's incredibly fair. And I've really enjoyed that about it because we have the added level of support that comes with being a varsity program. We have athletic trainers, we have assistants in tracking for academic progress, things like that. And so those resources coming into play here has been great for the experience of the student athlete, where they can come here and feel like they're a part of a very serious varsity sport at the college level.
If they're coming to Aquinas, though, probably they're coming because the school is such an academic, stalwart. It's a great academic school. You can get all kinds of, opportunities, career opportunities at this university. So I think I would guess that most of the kids that are coming to you are coming for the education, not necessarily the lacrosse.
I think it's a combination of everything. We have great academics. We have a really strong athletic department with teams that compete nationally across the board. And then the other chunk that's been really attractive to us is being in the heart of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a great city with a lot of great opportunities for jobs, career development, internships, and things like that. So really in our recruiting, we've seen kind of a combination of all of those things bring people into Aquinas.
Okay. Well, let's talk specifically about this year. What's the strengths this year? And then maybe talk a little bit about what the weaknesses are.
Our strengths are definitely going to be our depth, sitting at a full 41-man roster, and then having depth developed all the way down the roster at every position really makes us stand out within our league and within the NAIA, where more teams are developing or newer. So those things really kind of set the tone for our style of play, which is, anybody who's seen us play in the last 2 years knows that we're very aggressive. We're very in your face. We're trying to push the tempo of play, whether that be on offense, defense, or in transition with our 10-man ride. So we're looking to do much the same this year, like use our strengths, use the depth of our roster, use our energy and athleticism to push the pace, to get after teams, and play a really fun, exciting brand of lacrosse.
Almost everybody's playing a 10-man ride. When goalies get to the point where they can be much more accurate at the other end of the field, at what point do you come out of it?
It's kind of tough. I think ultimately, like we kind of have our own formula and equation. And really, I think if we can create more stops and more turnovers and more offense for ourselves, than we give up, I think like it's still definitely worth it to run the 10-man. Like if you look at it, if we're stopping them, if we get an extra, 5 to 7 stops in the ride in a game, then it's not such a big deal that you hit one empty netter against us, because ultimately we're going to get 7 more possessions. And I think that we could score at least 2 goals with those possessions. But definitely is on the rise, like long sticks, goalies getting much better at hitting those like long highlight reel empty netters.
They look good, if nothing else. And we actually now practice full field throws for our goalies. We don't add it for like 4 hours, but we do probably 10 or 15 a day, just to make sure that there's some understanding. And then it also helps their passing, because they're so used to making the shorter passes. It makes them, creates that opportunity to throw the ball a little bit farther. What keeps you up at night, or right now? You open against Central Michigan on Saturday, the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to start off with an MCLA team. So what keeps you up at night when you finally get to your league conference?
Really not much. I have a lot of faith in our guys. I have a lot of faith in what we're doing. We've had a really young group that we've kept in-house more than maybe we have in the past. We haven't gone out and played as much outside competition early season or in the fall. And a lot of that is by design. We wanted to get a lot of practices with them. I think I was just talking to Coach Treppa in the office. We've had, I think, more than 85 practices with the men between the fall and the spring, which has been fantastic for our development. But if there's one thing that makes me a little bit worried during the season is that, these guys are still, even though they prove it to me in practice every day, we haven't proved it wearing short sleeve jerseys on the field yet. There's going to be a lot of firsts this season: first ground ball, first goal, first thing like that. So really the only thing that worries me about the season is that we can make that transition from our practice into games.
In our previews, and we've done a number of previews between the Division I schools and the MIAA, one of the questions we've been talking about is that improvement between game 1 and game 2. And is it true, or is it an urban legend? Because there's those who believe that, coming out of the first week of practice, you pretty much know who your team is. And it's been interesting listening to the understanding that somehow you would magically get better after that first game. And I'm not, it's just one of those conversations that kind of makes it interesting. You think the top end of the NAIA can compete with the top end of the MIAA?
I would say absolutely. I think you can't really play the box score game too hard in lacrosse. Like this team beat them by 5 and they lost them by 3. So, that's not quite how it works. But haven't been out. Like I love going to MIA games that I'm around locally. Like we've competed against some of those teams in scrimmages and things like that. And I think really, really Hope and Albion have separated themselves at the top of that league. They have very incredibly strong programs with really talented kids up and down. And I think they would match really, really well with the top of the NAIA teams. I think it would be good competitive games. Who wins? It's hard to say. Maybe different year to year, but I think it'd be competitive.
I don't want to be critical, but you mentioned something that you have more opportunities to practice and don't necessarily have to follow the book. You also have one of your rules in your league that my senior could come out and practice with your varsity team, a 17-year-old kid playing with 21, 22-year-old men. I don't think that's a good idea. That's just a personal opinion. But do you worry about when you don't have the parameters and the structure? And I'm by no stretch of the imagination any NCAA fan. I think they've been proven to be pretty inconsistent. But do you worry about lacrosse becoming more important because of the loose rules?
Yeah, I do, and I've definitely seen it in the NAIA, and I think like yeah, you're spot on with that. Like with more freedom comes more responsibility on the coaching end, and I've seen it abused by other programs and some things that aren't good that's going on. But I think ultimately, if you have a good head coach at the helm who has good morals, values, and responsibility, you could turn those things into a really big positive. For instance, like we'll have high schoolers come out and train with the team every once in a while and practice. But I'm smart about it. We're not just feeding them to the wolves and like a full contact drill here and there because they're undersized. I had a lot of experience growing up in upstate New York. I started playing men's league in 8th grade. But with that, like, not everybody was going all out at me. Like I played goalie, so there were some different things about it. Like there's a little bit of understanding and control of the game. So when we do have a high schooler out to our practice, we really don't have anybody younger than a senior with us. And we're watching them and taking them out of certain things and not just like feeding them into full contact head-on drills with a fully developed 23, 24-year-old grad student defenseman or anything like that. But I think ultimately like it just lands a lot more responsibility on my plate to make sure that we're doing the right things. We're keeping the guys safe. We have their overall health, wellness, and education and future in mind with what we're doing with our training programs and how long we're going and what we're doing.
Upstate New York, where?
Syracuse area, Lafayette High School, small place, but really rich lacrosse history.
I know it well. I'm a Lake Placid kid, so I grew up.
Oh, yes.
As a ski racer. I grew up across the street from Whiteface. So when I have conversations with guys, especially the Long Island guys, Jerry Byrne and I always have this conversation. I said, "You guys think upstate's Albany, and you're a long way from Albany." And there's always that argument between Long Island, sort of the way the attackmen that come out of Long Island, and Central New York is a really cool place. It's one of the places where you're kind of expected to come back to your hometown and coach in the summertime. So those kids get really good coaching. And the bigger the name, it really doesn't matter. Central New York has been doing it for probably 50 years that way. And
oh, absolutely.
The Potsdams and all of those schools in those areas, it's fun to have those conversations between the Levittown guys and the Central New York guys. Really different approaches, but they obviously both produce great players.
Oh, absolutely. And you're seeing it come along now. Like a lot of our guys are getting into coaching and developing the Michigan lacrosse community. But yeah, it's a large part of the reason why I coached. I had a lot of great men come back and give back, whether that's in like a part-time role with like a JV or a modified 7th, 8th grade team, or, my 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade team. We had a lot of like great men from the community who had gone off and played really, really high level lacrosse and came back and had time to donate to us. And like, it's one of the things that inspired me to get into coaching.
We have some fun with the lacrosse guys that we have with this conversation with box lacrosse, which is what I grew up with. And my argument to most of the guys around the Detroit area is that they're not teaching box lacrosse. They're teaching lacrosse in a small space. Yet they're coming off as they're hanging their shingle out as being professionals as in box. But when you ask them a very specific question about what they're teaching, they can't give you an answer because they don't know. They just don't understand the concepts. And it's a whole different, it really is it's like, watermelons and Ferraris. It's catching and passing, but it really is a different animal, is it not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when done right and against high level opponents will really, really teach you a lot about the game. And yeah, there's some places where it's done a little bit poorly. It becomes a little bit more about just like physical violence or playing field lacrosse inside. But when done right, great teaching tool for the field game, great experience, does all the same things that field lacrosse does for your development.
As a 230-pounder, I was a really good box player because I didn't have to run very far. The upside to it on the field, you might as well just tie me with an egg timer. I get that problem. 2 last questions. You're a goaltender. As a coach now with some experience under your belt, are you an offensive guy or defensive guy?
I would say I really pride myself on just knowing the game all around. I try to weasel out of the question much, but to go back to the last question, I grew up being a field player, specializing in mostly goalie, especially as I got older. But one of the good things about my lacrosse education is that I played offense in transition and box lacrosse. which is really great. I got to spend a good number of years down at the Onondaga Nation Reservation playing on their box teams. Had an incredibly good array of coaches there to learn the game from. So I really do enjoy the offensive end of the game. And then I went off and played college goalie and things like that. So I love like the entire game, the all encompassing game of lacrosse. And like offense maybe has, a little bit more nuances. I think defensive guys would maybe get upset by me saying that, like, oh, defense is complex. Like, I definitely understand that. But as a coach, offense can really, there's a million directions you can go. And I really love that. I love how many just different styles and opportunities there are to play.
All right, let me ask a more specific question because I'm gonna drill down and I get an answer. We all lay at bed at night thinking about something, and it usually is one side of the ball or the other. And as an old goaltender, I'm an offensive guy, and it's not much. So when I get the dual answer, I understand that premise. But honestly, what do you like more to coach, offense or defense?
I think I like offense because a little bit more because you have the opportunity to develop things around the different skill sets and things that you have. But also at my core too, I'm a big defensive guy. Like you have to protect your own net. You have to get aggressive, and there's something that's a little selfless about defense, and having a really good defensive unit that's 7 men defending together that like really, really gets me fired up. But from the coaching side, offense, being able to tweak things, move things around, and make a bigger difference there, I really enjoy too.
I think goaltenders spend their time watching the offensive end of things when they don't have the ball. And I think defensemen just kind of come and go, and they're just happy to play and they're live to it. And I think goaltenders generally are smarter than defensemen. And that's certainly a personal point of view. That's not to disparage any defenseman, but it is what it is. So, last question: what's success for you in 2024?
Success for us in 2024 will be keeping a consistent energy, attitude, and effort throughout the season. It's hard for me to set any benchmarks in terms of win-loss or this position in the national polls or the conference polls or things like that. I think we have enough potential, whereas if we stay consistent in what we do, we show up every day and we attack every game with a lot of effort and the right attitude, I think that we can compete with every single team on our schedule. We're a little younger, so the consistency isn't proven. So I'd hate to set any limitation on them one way or the other. But I think success for us would just be going 100% the entire season with everything we do, staying committed to what we do, and we'll let the chips fall where they may after that.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you spending some time with us. We wish you the best this season, and we'll certainly be checking in as we get towards the end of the season, kind of see where everybody is in the league. And you have yourself a great opener on Saturday against Central Michigan. And who thought in February you might be able to wear short sleeves and maybe get tan?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible to be playing in late February. I still feel like we're late to the party on that. So can't wait to get going. Thanks for talking to me, and thanks for your coverage and a little more exposure on NAIA lacrosse.
Welcome back. We're talking to Frank Rogers, the new head coach at Siena Heights men's lacrosse. Frank is a well-storied coach in taking over a program a very storied program that started by Ed Maloney probably 15 years ago. So, Frank, appreciate you coming aboard and spending some time talking with us.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and doing this.
For the sake of clarity and more importantly, transparency, you and I have a history a little bit. We've competed against each other at other schools and other venues. So I have great respect for you as a coach, Frank, and I look forward to a conversation and certainly watching you this year with what you do with Siena Heights. So before we get into the team, sort of give us the landscape. Aquinas was the last time that I remember you coaching, but you've had a pretty fun travel trip around Division II.
Yeah, I've kind of moved around and checked and made some changes. I mean, Aquinas, sadly, at the time, didn't have any full-time coaching. It was all part-time. When my daughter graduated, I had the opportunity to start a full-time and do full-time nothing but coaching down in North Carolina, and went down there. Sadly, the school academics weren't quite what I'd wanted them to be. And then there was rumbling of going to D3. So I took a move and went to a D2 program in Alabama and started that. Was there for 5 years. wanted to had that itch to get a little bit closer to home. So we went up to Iowa and was doing both men's and women up in Iowa. And that got old. It kind of trying to do two programs at the same time in the same season kind of wears you out. And I'm not real young. And when an offer came for Florida, we thought, man, Florida, we can go down there, we can coach for a few years, and we can retire and stay there. We got down there and we figured out that we're definitely not Florida people. It's too expensive, too hot, and too many people. So the opportunity came to come up to Siena. We love the WHAC. We love Michigan. Our daughters are all in Grand Rapids and their families. So, and the history of Siena Heights and the program and what Ed had done here, it was kind of a no-brainer to come back to the WHAC and come back to Michigan.
Having coached women, do you have a favorite, or are they both equally pleasurable for different reasons?
I think they're both equally pleasurable for both. One of the reasons I got kind of swayed towards the women was my daughter wanted to start playing. Did get a little tired of the, hey guys, we need the ball to score goals, not hits. We got a little carried away with people, at that level. We're getting a little carried away with wanting to do nothing but hitting and not picking up balls. But they are two, they're unique because they're two totally different sports, with the basics being the same. You got to pass, catch, and score goals. So we took a lot of the men's game and transferred it over to the women's game and did some changes and did some things there. But they were both enjoyable, in different ways.
So you land in Adrian. You're the first year coach, or first year there at Adrian, coming off I think a 9-6 season a year ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So you've had some great success. Ed Maloney started the program about 15 years ago. Ed was there for about 12 years before Ed passed.
Yeah. And
Coach Masick was there for 2 years, and now you're running the program. So talk briefly about what you find. It's been a bit of a rough start. 24. You're 0-2 at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is correct. We're going through some growing pains and some growing changes. We had some key players graduate. We do have a lot of upperclassmen returners though, but it's a totally different system, a little different. Every coach is a little different and having to adjust to my style of coaching and being older, more a little bit more of a disciplinarian and things like that, where the younger coach was a little bit more wanted to be their friends, from what I understand. So we're going through a little bit of growing pains, but the guys are coming around and responding well. And I think as the season goes, we're going to definitely see that.
What's your offensive style on the men's side? I know what your women's style is. I'm just curious what you run on the men's side.
Well, we I don't know if we have a style. We kind of like to freelance it. We run more out of sets and not plays, and we can develop. And that's been kind of the guys are having to learn to see the the field IQ and see the field a lot more. It's not you're going to run here, set a pick here, and do that type of thing.
Sort of run and gun a little bit, maybe.
What that kind of that Syracuse mentality. That's what happens when you come from Central New York.
No, I appreciate that. We've been very fortunate to have a number of interviews with guys that were Central New York guys, Potsdam, certainly Long Island, and I understand that premise. What is Siena Heights has got a great athletic reputation. They've done a great job over the last 10 or 15 years of building the school into an athletic power in a number of sports. What do you have to do this year to find yourself going in the right direction? And part of that same question is, are you recruiting a different kid for an NAIA team than you might for a Division III school?
Actually, I guess we set ourselves a little bit different and higher. We're not going after the Division III kid. We kind of more go up against the D2 type kids in that mentality. But I'm sure what I'm recruiting is different. Traditionally, if you go back and look at the rosters, It's been predominantly a Southeast Michigan roster. Already with our new recruiting classes, we have 3 guys from California, Colorado, a couple from Florida, a couple from New York, Canada. So we've opened up the recruiting net, and we're expanding quite often. And we have a couple guys too from Michigan, but even areas that we never have. I mean, we signed a guy from Rockford, which they've never had anybody from Rockford coming over. Things like that. So definitely our style is different. That comes, I guess, with experience though too, and having that huge network that we're working with a lot of different areas and regions and things like that to help grow our roster.
Have you noticed any difference between the NAI division and some of the Division III guys? I mean, you've coached both. Are they close in talent?
Yeah, I mean, I coached at the D2. I was but I think we as NAIA, I think sometimes we sure don't give ourselves enough credit, and then also I think that the nationwide they don't. I always look at we should be able to, and we did it a lot at Ambrose where we lined up against D2s. We rarely ever played a D3 school. I mean, we were playing Lewis and Quincy and things like that. And we shouldn't be swaying away. I mean, we give scholarships just like a Division II team does. I think our level of play there, especially as you get to the higher level, our top 10 teams in the country should be able to line up against anybody. So I look at more, and as we grow this program even more and make it stronger, that that's where we're looking more to compete with is at the D2 level than the D3 level.
Ask the question because if you go back 10, 12 years, the clubs were stronger than they are now. And that's partly because the NAI didn't put the numbers up that they're putting up now. And certainly the MIAA in Michigan wasn't as strong as it's become. And when you used to have the conversations about whether it was Michigan could play at the Division I level, I was an MCLA coach, and I was pretty clear that we were never going to be able to play at the Division I level. I would argue in those days that even good MCLA teams couldn't play with Division III teams. And there was that same discussion, and I think that kind of it changes. The MIAA has certainly got better. The top teams in your conference can certainly play at almost any level for Division III, and it's actually hurt the club programs because I think the club programs have become more nickel-like related than what we used to be the MCLA. It's not true in all cases. Certainly, Michigan State and Grand Valley both have great club programs, but the landscape's changed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just more opportunities that keep going, keep coming up, and we, it's a great thing, with our sports, we're seeing, some good growth, and hopefully it continues, and kids are getting more opportunities, and and then scholarship opportunities and things like that.
Well, good. Any thoughts on the season? Just maybe talk briefly on strengths and what you think you're going to be working on, and then we can wrap it up.
We're continuing to work on, getting, making the changes within, the system and how we do things and that type of thing, and continuing to grow. I think you'll definitely see as the season progresses, that growth, and that improvement and stuff. It's kind of like the early games have been kind of testing the waters and trying to get things sharpened up. And as we go along, I think, you'll definitely see that.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, Frank. We'll certainly keep in touch during the season. We want to be able to. The Michigan Lacrosse Review has been a sort of a national focus, interviewing lots of national celebrities and stars of the sport. We're going to kind of bring it back a little bit local part of the time. We certainly want to still have those conversations with PLL guys and some of the top coaches in the country.
Oh, sure.
We certainly want to concentrate on being able to cover the college games. So we're going to do that this year, and we appreciate your time. We wish you the best of luck in your first year back at Sand Heights.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all that you do with putting the spotlight on Michigan lacrosse and everything. So keep up the good work, and we look forward to talking in the future.
Welcome back. We're talking with Carlos Mata, who's the head coach at Medina University in Livonia. Carlo, you're entering your third year. Last year, you guys were 8-8, 5-7. things are moving in the right direction. You open the season with 2 wins against Benedictine College and Columbia. So obviously you got to be pretty happy. So first, thank you for taking the time to talk a little bit about a preview, and maybe just talk a little bit about the preseason and some thoughts and where you think you're going to go this year.
No problem. Really appreciate you having us. I think preseason went well. I think we did a lot over the last couple of years to remedy I think the main issue that we had as a team with the way that we would like to play is filling in the depth. So we have a roster of 37 right now. We got 35 playable guys. And we're in a spot where we really feel like we can be competitive with anyone in the country. So, preseason went really well. We're able to push the guys in the way that we want to, compete the way that we want to at practice finally. And, we feel like, again, we have the talent, the depth to play the way we want to play. And, while we weren't perfect this last weekend, I think we were able to showcase the way that we want to play and hopefully move in the right direction to continue to get better every week and, be able to do the same thing hopefully next week when we go on a spring break trip and play 3 games in 4 days.
When you're scoring 35 goals in the opening weekend, I'm not sure I'd complain too much about my offense at this point.
Yeah.
Competition going what it is this early season. There's lots of variables. I get that part, but that's got at least like get a little bit happy when you hit in the back of the net.
Yeah. No, I mean, the nice thing is that, we didn't really graduate a lot of guys, especially on the offensive side. We have 5 of our 7 leading scorers returning from last year. And then, a lot of the help that we brought in terms of depth was on the offensive side with freshmen or transfers. So, we feel pretty confident with running about 12 guys on offense. We played about 11 or 12 guys throughout the opening weekend, and something that we're, really hoping to lean on. Again, trying to build the team to, obviously be competitive in every game, but with our sights set on, hopefully being competitive in the WHAC tournament at the end of the year and the national tournament where, you're playing 3 games in 4 or 5 days. So having that extra depth allows us to hopefully keep our, higher end guys a little bit more fresh and able to hopefully close out games for us in the fourth quarters.
You're a DeWitt guy through Indiana Tech as a midfielder, and so you've got a pretty good understanding of the league, not only as a coach, but as a player. Do you recruit? This has been sort of a thread that we've talked to the other coaches in the league. You recruit a specific kind of player for this league as compared to maybe a Division III or Division II program, or is it pretty much that same sort of casting your net into that same sort of pond?
So, I think we're really looking for, a player that likes to play in a certain way. And this probably dates back to my Indiana Tech days where, when I was at Indiana Tech, their current head coach was our graduate assistant. But, the way that they play is very similar to the way that we are trying to play now. So very aggressive, transition based, on hands. So, defensively, we're looking for guys that really want to fly around, compete, be aggressive, go for takeaway checks, slide early, cause a lot of chaos in the middle of the field. So, that's all empowered for us by having what we feel is the best goalie in the country with Jeff Varner. I mean, I think he helped to, showcase that at least early on in the season this weekend with a 76% save percentage over 2 games. But he allows us to do a lot of that stuff on the back end, and then feel comfortable with pushing the pace in transition and trying to get a lot of those goals, which is again why we recruit just for our midfield a lot of athletes, a lot of guys that maybe aren't from the biggest hotbed areas, but guys that we feel fit really well into our system, can maybe play 2 ways, are fast, athletic, and can make really good decisions for us in transition, which allow us to dictate the pace of play and play the way we're trying to play. I try to really recruit from all over the country, and I think our roster showcases that. I think we have guys from 13 or 14 different states on our team. Obviously, day and age, the internet definitely makes that a lot easier than I'm sure it was in the past. But I also lived in California for 3.5 years, so you'll see a handful of guys on our roster from California. I coached was around the area that I coached when I was living out in California.
Whereabouts in California?
Just north of Los Angeles, Santa Clarita, California.
Okay. It's a bit of a hotbed. Not quite San Diego, but certainly they're growing them up pretty well. Orange County is also catching them. Yes. I spent almost 20 years in San Diego, so that was the beginnings in the early 80s, was the beginning of Rancho Bernardo and Torrey Pines and some of those programs.
Yep.
Guys that were instrumental. So that's a good thing. Given the choice, athleticism or IQ?
I think we have a really good mix of both. I think we have some guys that, you wouldn't consider your typical athletes that do really well for us. And, I think the first guy that jumps off the page for me is our leading scorer the first weekend, Zachary Lane. Not your typical, super athletic guy, but the man's been playing lacrosse since he was 3 years old. So he understands the game, he understands what we're looking for out of him. And he's a guy that can, find guys open like he did, day 2 for us against Columbia, and a guy that can score goals if they're not going to play him as a shooter, like he did day 1 where he scored 5 goals. So I think he kind of, allows us to have that mix where, we can surround him and maybe a couple of our other, more traditional like off-ball shooter guys with 3 or 4 athletes. And we find that, that gives us the best mix of fluidity where, we don't have 6 guys that all need the ball on their stick to be successful. And we don't have 6 guys who can't win a dodge and can't create anything. So we're never creating any advantage in offense. So, we normally like to have a mix of 3 or 4 on-ball guys who are dodging and creating, and 1 or 2 or 3 off-ball guys who are trying to find those gaps and keeping the ball hot and, executing when they need to execute, but moving the ball on to other guys if we haven't created an advantage yet.
One of the threads that we've talked to the other coaches in the league, and I think the emergence of the NAIA is certainly the emergence of the MIAA. If you go back 10 years, you had a very strong club program organization in Michigan. The MCLA was, some of the best teams in the country. As the NAIA has come in, as the MIAA has gotten better, certainly the MIA and Hope and Adrian, Albion, both they've got a national reputation. The club teams have actually suffered a little bit. They've become less of a factor, simply because those kids that typically went to Michigan State or Michigan are now coming to you guys, which is certainly an advantage because now they have not to suggest that a club program isn't a real program. Some were, but now you have an adult coach with a school-based process, and I think it's better for overall with lacrosse in the area for sure. Kids now have certainly more opportunities, and I think that's one of those it's on discussion. So from that perspective, I think that makes sense. Talk briefly.
I think it's really exciting. Honestly, I really as someone that when I was playing at NAIA Tech, we were an MCLA school. We played in the MCLA. We played against St. Thomas and Dayton and NDSU and all those really good UMLC teams. I think it's exciting for kids to have more options. Some kids really want to go to Michigan State and be able to take advantage of all the social and kind of big school opportunities that you have at a school like that, while still being able to play lacrosse. And some kids want to stay maybe a little bit closer to home or have something that while Michigan State is very serious, there's a little bit more of a athletic kind of focus feel, school sponsored feel. Getting a little bit more scholarship money, not having to pay out of pocket and kind of get there. And I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to it. So, I really enjoy, being able to recruit kids and finding the kids that want that outcome and, having no ill will towards guys that want to go play that, because obviously that's something that I did, 10 years ago was playing the MCLA.
Last question. What keeps you up at night? Are you an offensive guy or defensive guy?
I tend to be more of an offensive guy now. So I think, we're always trying to find that balance with the way that we play, between playing very fast and still possessing the ball effectively. So I think it's always that kind of double-sided, which one is better? Are we always just kind of pushing and trying to find, some shots in transition and, maybe living with and learning to live with as a head coach, especially with some turnovers that you don't really like to see? And hopefully that balances out with you getting 3 or 4 more transition goals that you wouldn't have gotten if you had always slowed it down. And, maybe then sacrificing a little bit more possession than you would really like. And, maybe tiring your defense out a little bit more than they would like. So, I think that's always the biggest kind of conundrum for me going back and forth is, how fast is too fast, and what can we get away with? And I think a lot of that really depends on, the guys that we have on the field, and being able to trust, especially those 3 or 4 guys that are consistently on the field with our starting attack, and kind of the guys that we get out of the box early to, hopefully through practice make the right decisions and be able to really live with those decisions and their mistakes that they make, and allow them to grow as players and people throughout the year. And hopefully by the end of the year, we're at that perfect balance where we're pushing when we should push, and we're slowing when we should slow down, and they're making all the right decisions. And, we're taking advantage of every transition opportunity that we have, and, they're making the right decisions to slow down when we can't.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. I know you're going south for spring break, Savannah, Tennessee Wesleyan. There's some pretty good teams coming up on the schedule, so hopefully that's a great trip for you. You get off to a great start and challenge hopefully for conference championship.
Yeah, no, that's the hope. And, that's why we kind of try to play the tough schedule that we're playing, especially out of conference, because, we know conference play is going to be tough. I think every single team this year got better. So there really is no easy games for us in the WHAC. So, hopefully the guys can, regardless of what the results are, we can learn from this next weekend, and then our last game out of conference against St. Ambrose, and be ready to play in a very competitive WHAC where, games come really fast and furious once we get into conference play, and rely on our depth and, our leadership now, and hopefully, have a good year. And like you said, compete for a conference championship at the end of it.
Carlos, thanks for much for your time, and you have a great season.
No problem. Thank you so much. And, appreciate you putting together this whole broadcast and being able to get out here and talk about it a little bit.
Welcome back. We're talking to Tom McGuire, who is the head coach at Concordia University down in Ann Arbor. We're talking a little bit about the Wolverine Hoosiers Athletic Conference. If I got that right?
You got it.
You had a great season last year at 15-3, finished up with going to the quarterfinals of the NAIA, losing to Cumberland. And you've already started out the season, and I think it was terrific. And before we get into the conversation, your first game is the last game you played last year.
Yeah.
You lose in overtime 10-9, but obviously you're not afraid in any way, shape, or form to schedule the tough games and come right back and look at the process. So you've started off with I think a 1-1 record at this point. So thank you for taking the time and talk a little bit about your team.
Yeah, for the 2 hours after we lost to Cumberland's last year, I was on the phone with their coach asking if we could have our first game be against them, because I was tired of losing to them. Now, unfortunately, I still haven't beat them, but and we have I think we have we were preseason 5, so we have all 1 through 4 on our schedule this year. So we play the number 1 team in the nation next when we go down to Florida for spring break, which is Kaiser. They won the championship last year. And then we also play Weber, who I think is 3 at this point. And so our team, we scheduled a tough slate on purpose because we feel like we're in the best position we've ever been to win a national championship. We have an experienced team, balanced, deep, talented, and there's really I don't see anything specific that's going to hold us back. And so we're trying to, play these big dogs early, get some experience, learn from it for when we, eventually see them again down the road.
Continuity is important. In 6 years, if you look at your schedule, it's gotten better every year. Your first year, as you mentioned earlier in the pre-interview we talked about, you had, 18 to 20 guys. Now you've got a complete team with talent, and it takes a while. And I think whether you're playing in the NAIA or you're playing in the NCAA, continuity is an important factor. So now your roster is much more conducive to being able to take those kinds of opportunities and play those teams and not you can get beat up. So what in your brain makes you want to schedule those tough teams?
I think we can beat them. And I'd love to prove to our players that we're that good. I think there's, our guys they know we're good, but there's always that element of uncertainty, like how good are we? And I think it's important for us to set that tone early on that we're just as good as anybody. We can beat anybody. And let that confidence and mindset carry us through those tough moments, because, we had a really good year last year, but we had to win a couple close games, and we had to get lucky, and we had to get relatively injury free, and we'll need that again, and we'll need to win some tough close ones. And as long as we can learn from, if we win these games, great, we learn from them. If we lose these games, as long as we learn from them, the good teams are going to let you know what you're not good at. So we can apply that and just, keep marching along. Again, I think we feel like we do have some wiggle room, because I feel really confident within our conference. And basically, if we win our conference, we're guaranteed postseason, but basically top 2 in the conference is in the postseason historically. And I feel like we're going to be there.
Prospect of recruiting for you, you kind of know what you need for your school, and from a talent standpoint. Obviously, most kids coming to NAIA schools and Division III schools in the MIAA, they're coming for education before they're coming for lacrosse, because if they were going to play professionally at it, they would be playing at a higher level. My point, are you looking at the same kids that the Division III teams are looking at, pretty much the same kids?
Well, when I was at K, we were looking at completely different kids. I think some of those Division III schools that are really high academic, we're not looking at the same, and we don't have engineering, so obviously we don't look at any tech kids. But I'd say when we're recruiting, the final group of schools often includes us and Division III schools like Adrian, Albion. Those schools are very similar and have a lot of the same profiles as we do. And so, it's, as far as like the type of student, it depends, it's similar for some Division III. Now, talent level there's no difference. It's, we're trying to get the best, and I'm happy to have a kid tell me no if he feels like, he wants to go to a more prestigious established program. But talent wise, it's the same.
Talk briefly on this year's offense and defense strengths and weaknesses. Maybe what keeps you up at night and what you're happy about.
I love our depth on offense. I feel like we have really 10 guys that I would say can play for almost any program in the NAIA, and a lot of talent, a lot of firepower. Finding the right mixture is still a process right now. Sometimes it's easier to only have 6 good players, because you don't have any mystery about what you got to do. At the defensive end, we have, again, depth, experience. That we only lost 2 players from last year's season, and it was two polls. So I think there is still some figuring out to do with the rotation there. Our goalie is a 4-year starter. He's awesome, great leader. Our faceoff guy is a 4-year starter. He's amazing. Our defensive midfield is probably the area that took the biggest hit, because we have a guy who's ineligible, who was going to play a ton of minutes for us. And so we have to make the decision on, how much do we like our depth there? Do we use some of our offensive guys on defense? How do we want to approach that? But honestly, there's, I'm glad that I don't have an obvious weakness for us, but really the only thing is we just haven't done it yet. We have the capability, we just haven't done it yet.
You guys peek over the hill a little bit with a little success, and it rolls downhill. It rolls downhill from there. As in a general rule, and this is just sort of a general thought, is the NAIA, in your mind, is it a defensive sort of oriented national programs, or is it an offensive programs?
I don't
I asked that
know.
because I think if you look at the Big Ten, the Big Ten is really devoted to defense. And when they go out of conference, their defense seems to hold up better than their offenses. If you look at East Coast teams, they seem to score more. It's just a
Yeah.
difference. I'm not. That's just it's a very broad painted brush.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the team that won the national championship last year, it kind of ebbs and flows because the NAIA is typically a mix of teams or the teams are usually a mix of they've recruited and they've built from within, and then they'll pluck some D2, D1 guys that, for whatever reason, it didn't work out there, right? And so last year, Kaiser had a Division I goalie on their team, and so they were very defensive oriented. But we play them next, and I'm watching the film, and like they probably have the most firepower on offense in the nation this year. And like for us, we have a midi who transfers from a Division I school and a defenseman who transfers from a Division I school. And so I think it's probably more than anything. It varies from year to year depending on roster build.
Ty, you can either be an offensive coach or a defensive coach. And I was a goalie, and I think about only offense now in my career. I could care less about defense. My point, every coach we've asked this question of, when you lay at night and you got to think about your head in your brain, are you an offensive guy or defensive guy?
Yeah, more defensive. It just lends to my personality. I've coached both, here and at Kalamazoo, and I have confidence in both, but I think like the well runs dry quicker with offense and like what I can provide to them. So
I asked the question because this is a completely unscientific survey, but of the 17 or 18 coaches that we've interviewed for a variety of conferences for this previews for 2024, almost 80% played a position, offense or defense, and now have been in love with the other end of it. So if they're a defenseman, they like offense. If they're a goalie, they like offense. And a bunch of offensive guys are now coaching defense. And I just found it funny because you'd think you would gravitate towards what you played. But part of it is you knew how to dissect it better. So therefore, it became an easier thing to coach because you know how to exploit it, which is not a big deal.
Yeah, and I think it's also like most coaches are uber competitive and love the game and are curious to prove to themselves and others that they're not a one-trick pony and that they can do it on the other side as well.
Yeah. Well, listen, great season last year. We got a great start this year with a tough 1-goal loss in overtime to last year's champion. So have a great season, and I appreciate your time. And we'll be keeping up with you along the way.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Want to take the time to thank Chris, Ty, Frank, and Carlos for spending some time with us, talking a little bit about the WHAC, and hopefully there's some insight for you guys to learn if you want to learn about the league, check out their website. There's a lot of good games and a lot of good athletes in the league, and it'll be fun watching them and how they progress this spring. So we will be back next week with part 2, and we hope you enjoyed this show. And for all the guys in back, thanks for your time.